The cat is out of the bag. Labour is going to raise taxes.
We're going to be discussing how the government is breaking a key manifesto pledge in order to plug a black hole of its own making.
It's a disaster. It explains a lot of the social tensions. It explains why you now got groups fighting each other over a fixed pie. It explains the rise of zero-sum politics. It explains the rise of reform, of the Green Party, of the Corbynites. Everything is changing. Tensions are rising, and economic growth is at the heart of this. It's not the only thing at all. Obviously, immigration is very important also, but it's at the heart of a lot of our problems. It's why the welfare state is unaffordable. And Reeves coming along just thinking that the answer is to spend, tax. Well, that is the road to disaster.
Well, this is a surprise. This is a turn up for the books, Tim. And we're joined by Allister Heath, editor of the Sunday Telegraph, in the Daily Tea studio. Taxes are going to go up.
Ah, what a surprise.
Now, I remember the Labour manifesto last year suggesting that taxes on working people absolutely weren't going to go up.
Yes.
Well, that's because everything was fully costed, wasn't it?
Fully costed. Fiscal discipline, no more borrowing, no more tax and spend. How's that looking now, chaps?
Well,
15 months on.
Aside from the taxes having already gone up in one budget, after which Rachel Reeves said would not happen again, and now she's talking about it happening yet again, some of this hinges on Labour's definition of working people.
Shall we listen to what Rachel Reeves has said so far on this issue, looking ahead to the budget on November the 26th?
There are tax rises coming down the track.
Yeah, but I think that this
Yes.
government are making... in terms of the ambition of this government, it is big.
But
we've
you
got to
agreed, yes,
always-
there are tax rises coming down
Well,
the track.
I was really clear during the general election campaign, and we discussed this many times, that I would always make sure that the numbers add up. And of course, challenges are being thrown our way, but I won't duck those challenges. Of course, we're looking at tax and spending as well, but the numbers will always add up with me as Chancellor.
Can you promise the British people you're not going to get stuck in a doom loop of having to go through this cycle every year of having to find more tax to fill
I
the
think
black hole?
nobody wants that cycle to end more than I do.
So what's the theory then, Alistair? If VAT, income tax and national insurance don't go up on so-called working people, whatever a working person is apparently somebody who works on the factory floor, according to Labour, and not a person who runs their own business and may be in danger of employing other people.
Well, it's all absurd semantics, isn't it? I mean, it's basically a modern Islingtonian way of describing the working class, I suppose, as they might understand it. So you say working people now rather than working class, so that you're not kind of falling back into supposedly antiquated terminology. It's all nonsense, right? We're going to face massive, crippling, terrible tax increases yet again after a calamitous, horrible budget last time. It's clearly a breach of everything Labour has said. We were promised that last time was just a one-off because for some strange reason they decided to spend as soon as they arrived in office. But of course, it's all going to happen again. And it's even worse than that. They now say they want to have more headroom than before, which means the tax increases could be even greater than the supposed black hole in the public finances. So you're talking about possibly 30 or 40 billion pounds in tax increases. Now, the IMF is predicting that GDP per capita in the UK will go up by 0.4%. Or 0.5% next year, which is basically nothing. Pathetic. What do you think is going to happen if you increase taxes by 30 or 40 billion? And what do you think is going to happen if you're actually targeting, the most successful people in society with these tax increases, as the Chancellor or her allies have been hinting at in briefings over the past few days, right? It's a massive shock to the economy. Again, this is a plan that will destine Britain to stagnation. The best outcome is economic stagnation. The best outcome is that the doom loop will just get worse and worse. These tax increases will create more problems than they solve.
She doesn't like the word doom loop, or she doesn't like the phrase doom loop, I should say. And she says, Tim, and this is the killer line of her defence, this is her line of defence, the UK is the fastest growing economy in the G7 for the first half of this year.
Right.
Which is quite a good argument. But
No, I mean, it's all nonsense. I mean, ultimately, the only form of growth that counts is GDP per capita. On
Right.
GDP per capita terms, Britain is performing abysmally, right? The only hope, as the Resolution Foundation pointed out, is that there's a collapse in employment and that somehow, because employment's falling, the GDP per capita numbers might look better. But this is horrible. What's happening here is that the economy is struggling. is struggling in a historic fashion. This is the worst prolonged period of economic growth probably since the Industrial Revolution, right? It's a disaster. It explains a lot of the social tensions. It explains why you now got groups fighting each other over a fixed pie. It explains the rise of zero-sum politics. It explains the rise of reform, of the Green Party, of the Corbynites. Everything is changing, tensions are rising, and economic growth is at the heart of this. It's not the only thing at all. Obviously, immigration is very important also, but it's at the heart of a lot of our problems. It's why the welfare state is unaffordable. And Reeves coming along just thinking that the answer is to spend, tax. Well, that is the road to disaster.
Okay, so I want to dig into some of that. First of all, on the issue of GDP per capita, how do we compare to our competitors on that?
Right, so the IMF thinks we're basically performing just as bad as France. So France and us are basically identical, growing by 0.4, 0.5% a year this year and next year. These are very poor numbers because GDP per capita basically says the public spending should never go up by more than GDP per capita. Right, because that's the amount of money we're generating as a country. So that's the money we have, and we can't really spend more than that. So if we spend more than that, either in the private sector or in the public sector, the only way to do that is to borrow money.
Yes.
In other words, we are living beyond our means. We are stuck in a mindset where the economy is growing by 1.5%, 2.5%, 3% a year, and we think we just think we're much richer than we are. We're not. We're poor. We're becoming poorer and poorer.
Is there anyone in the developed world who is doing things differently and it's resulted in a better rate of growth?
Yeah, so America has done much better than us since the financial crisis. Much better. There's a clear gap. Also, the emerging economies of Eastern Europe, for example, Poland, have done much, much better than us. Well, they've got, these countries are pro-growth. They've got a pro-growth mindset and a pro-growth tax system. They don't penalise and persecute the better off. They don't penalise and persecute people who make money, who set up businesses, who become rich. America has seen an explosion in entrepreneurship in recent years. You've had literally thousands of successful large companies created. Hardly any of that's happened in Britain. The City of London's been neutered. It was neutered deliberately by George Osborne after the financial crisis, so we lost this big engine of growth. And we've had some growth in tech and things like that, but it's been very small. It's been minnows. We've not created a Tesla. We've not created an Apple. We've not created a Microsoft. We've not created a Google, and so on. And countries that do well do all these kinds of things. And America's done that, and we haven't, and we are falling behind.
She seems to be saying, by the way, that millionaires aren't leaving in their droves. I mean, anecdotally, we hear that they are.
Yes.
There was also that report which found that there was a millionaire leaving every 45 minutes since Labour took power. But if they're not leaving now, and I think that's probably a fib by Rachel Reeves, they're going to, aren't they? Because the taxes that she has identified, apparently been pitch-rolling different ideas, an increase to capital gains tax, a rethink of bankers' bonuses, which were frozen under the Conservatives. She's now looking at national insurance on rental income, which could signal the death of the landlord. And then even if you haven't got that much money, even if you're just lucky enough to have some savings in a cash ISA, that could also be plundered for more taxes.
They're talking about halving that, aren't they? Currently it's £20,000.
Yes, I mean,
it's mooted that it might be reduced to £10,000.
Yes, I mean, and the idea is, but the idea is you might be able to put more money into stocks and shares ISAs instead. So,
right.
I mean, it's not that's among the tax rates. That's maybe not the worst if that is indeed the full plan. Obviously, if the plan is simply to reduce the amount of ISA funds in total, then of course it'd be a terrible thing.
Right.
But basically, she's wrong, right? Millionaires are clearly leaving the UK. Every survey of millionaires shows that they're leaving the UK at a much faster rate than they are leaving in other countries. Countries like Italy are attracting lots of people. America's attracting people. So the Middle Eastern countries are attracting
Dubai.
people. Indeed, yes. So clearly that's happening, right? It's just laughable to claim otherwise. And she's just delusional. She just thinks that she can tax and tax and tax and that there won't be any behavioural response. But, well, I've got news for her. There's always behavioural responses.
Yeah.
We live in a global open society. People move around. Also, the biggest departures come from immigrants. So very successful immigrants are people who have already made a choice once in their lives at least to change country.
They're nomadic.
Exactly. If you've already changed country once, the likelihood that you can change country a second time is quite high. This whole idea that London is some sort of utopia, the best city in the world, and people are going to put up with anything just to live here, well, that's been tested to destruction over the past 20 years.
I mean, the counter-argument is rule of law, English obviously spoken as the main language, good schools and good universities. Although some of the scenes that we've seen unfold in Oxford this week might challenge that view. What about this? Is she delusional as well, Tim, when she blames austerity, Brexit and Liz Truss for the economic woes we now face?
I think I'm going to have written on my gravestone, I blame Liz Truss.
Yes, why
whatever
not?
happened to me.
For anything.
I blame Liz Truss. The one thing I'd say on that is whenever the left talks about austerity, it always means austerity and spending cuts. But austerity also means tax rises, right?
Yes.
That is part of the picture of austerity. So there is a socialist version of austerity.
Yeah, and for them, austerity is reducing the public sector.
Yes.
But in reality, there's private sector austerity. That means tax increases.
Yes, precisely, yeah. And that's, in the 1940s, that's the kind of austerity that Labour imposed upon the country immediately after the war in order to build up public services. They raided everyone, and that's what partly delayed our recovery, whereas countries like West Germany were able to embrace the market and grow much, much quicker. Do I think she's delusional? I think it's useful for them. The interesting political question is, at what point does that cease working? When can they cease doing that? I suspect a year out they still can say, but the government left a mess, and look at Liz Truss.
I don't know, though, because I think YouGov's approval ratings are showing that she is now the least popular politician alongside Keir Starmer in the country and in a stretch of recent history. I don't know about this blaming Brexit thing. I mean, we're well beyond
That's
that because
interesting.
it's been clouded by the calamity that was the COVID pandemic, hasn't it? We're now nearly a decade on from the vote to leave in 2016. I just don't think that washes. I agree that one woman's austerity is another person's efficiency savings.
Yes.
And, Liz Truss?
Just to say on the Brexit point, because this is important, this is part of the reason why this government fails to govern, is it can't choose a narrative and stick to it. So it liked Brexit during the last election, and it's been very reluctant to criticise it or its impact, actually, even as we all know it's trying to roll some of it back by achieving greater integration back into Europe, free movement, aping regulation, etc. But it's been reluctant to actually criticise Brexit directly. Now it's doing it. And it's the same with immigration. It's the same with the flag. It's all that stuff. Yes. They chase where they think the narrative has moved to. They don't have one of their own that they stick to. And I think that's part of the reason why people don't trust them.
I think the Brexit point shows that they just don't understand politics. They don't understand Britain and they don't understand politics. They are completely detached. So they're only... their finger is not on the pulse of the nation. They are able to read opinion polls that are quite misleading. So if you look at opinion polls, it shows quite a lot of people will say stuff like, oh, Brexit was a failure, we'd quite like to rejoin the EU. It's nonsense. It's just like the digital ID card proposal. When Keir Starmer suddenly said, I want a digital ID card, you had polls that showed 60% or maybe even 70% support for the policy. My entire for the past 25 years that I've been following these things, right, or even 30 years, there's always been public support for ID cards when you just polled the question.
Yeah.
But suddenly, Keir Starmer says it's going to happen. Within a couple of weeks, the positive feeling for ID cards just collapsed. The polls literally have turned around. Starmer is so toxic that people disagree with anything he proposes automatically just because it's from him. And suddenly, you now have polling showing that most people don't want ID cards. It's the first time I've seen that in 30 years. And exactly the same thing would happen with Brexit. Right now, there's been no defence of Brexit made by anybody in a position of power for at least 5 or 6 years. Right, the last person who defended Brexit publicly, in a position of power was Boris Johnson when he was Prime Minister. Since then, there's been no pro-Brexit argument made, really. So it's not surprising that the polls have faltered. Obviously, governments of both sides have completely failed to make the most of Brexit, all that sort of stuff. But I can predict one thing. If this government said, we're going to undo Brexit and we're going to rejoin the EU, support for leaving or staying out of the EU would rocket immediately.
Yes, indeed.
And so, therefore, this government just has no clue. It doesn't understand public opinion.
It's got like the anti-Midas touch.
Yeah, it's got exactly. It's got a reverse Midas touch, a negative Midas touch, and it just looks at polls. Polling is very important, but it's very abstract.
Yes.
If you started having focus groups and said to people, do you want to rejoin the EU? Okay, so you want to start giving the EU 20, 30 billion pounds a year, you want to have total free movement, people will go nuts. And, I suspect the rejoin referendum would be 60 or 65% against rejoining. And of course, it would unleash Farage, it would unleash the Tories, it would completely break the Labour Party. So it's all delusion.
It's like when they poll and they say, would you be okay with paying an extra p in the pound to improve the NHS? It's a loaded question.
Exactly.
But there's no clarifying. But by the way, just to point out that the NHS will be 6% less productive than it was pre-COVID, and you still won't get an appointment. That's the way that they front load these things.
And I think also the penny in the pound makes people think they're just going to pay a penny.
Yes.
They forget the many, many pounds they pay and that it all adds up. I mean, a similar thing happened with devolution when there was the famous referendum in the 2000s about regional assembly for the northeast. Dominic Cummings cut his teeth in politics, and it was something which the left and the Labour Party just thought, of course people will vote for this, of course they'll vote for more self-governance, and they rejected it totally.
2-1, it was a total catastrophe. It was the original Brexit dry run. It was the first time the right won anything for a long time.
Yes.
But it was pioneering new tactics by doing things like pointing out that politicians would have more power and money would be wasted on politicians, that kind of stuff.
Yes, it was one of those things that proved that people lie to pollsters. We had the same issue with Brexit. We had the same problem with Donald Trump. We are sort of tilting at windmills because politicians argue based upon a false data set of what the public thinks about things. When the public is then actually confronted with the effects of that, they change their mind. And I think the same probably extends to economics. It's very easy in this environment to say, well, look, don't you want your hospitals to be improved? Wouldn't you like to spend a little bit more money to improve? And yes, people would in a survey say they would. But actually, when they consider the effects, personal and social, of tax rises, they reject it.
Yes. Also, let's be honest, the public right now doesn't seem to be holding the economic calamity that Brexit apparently presents against Nigel Farage, who was its key proponent.
True.
I mean, why is it? Clearly, it's a political attack line to try and reduce support for reform. Once again, it's backfiring.
Yes, I mean, clearly, Britain's woes haven't been caused by Brexit. They've been caused by something completely different, which is we've turned our backs on free markets. We've had a 30-year slow, gradual shift back towards social democracy, high taxes, increasingly large and badly managed public services, and so on and so forth. That is what's happened. We've embraced centrist dad economics, which has been a disaster. We don't build housing. We've got an extremely regulated planning system. I mean, all these sorts of things. We've had, everything's gone wrong, and the Tories and Labour have been incapable of articulating an alternative set of policies to try and break us out of this low growth rut. And I'm afraid to say, Reeves is just going to make us even more into a low growth economy. And if she's really planning some sort of wealth tax, then that is really the beginning of the end. It's the beginning of the end because no country can survive an actual wealth tax. The moment you really start saying to wealthy people, we're going to confiscate your money just because you happen to live here, maybe because you happen to own an expensive house in London, these people will leave and they will take their money with them. And the economy will be in deep straits.
Yeah.
So lots to look forward to on November the 26th.
Yes.
The inevitabilities of life, death and taxes. Allister Heath, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
If you're enjoying our journalism, why not sign up to From the Editor, our free email newsletter? Start your day with the latest news and opinion, plus our bite-sized puzzles. Scan the QR code to sign up free today.